Okay, what is this text by Nietzsche? This whole thing of the madman. What's the big deal about this madman? Why are there, it's probably something you've heard before, or at least excerpts you've heard before, such as the God is dead portion, is certainly taken out of context and misconstrued and misunderstood by so many, with great frequency. You've probably heard that part. You know what? Let's go backwards. Let's work backwards. Let's start with the Beatles. I began this portion of our journey with a song from the Beatles, The Fool on the Hill. As the song relates, everyone else thinks he's a fool, but he regards them as fools. There's something about being a fool which is somewhat subjective, right? So if everyone around you thinks you're a fool, it doesn't necessarily mean you are a fool. It could mean that all of them are fools, right? Maybe you're getting something that they're not getting. Maybe you understand something that they are not. Or it could just mean that you're a fool. But that's part of the point, is that those people who understand something that we don't often come across as just crazy people, right? They don't wash their hair, and they wear shirts with holes in them, and they do crazy shit, and they run around talking to different cameras in their guest bedroom. The fool on the hill stands around, and everyone calls him a fool. But he knows that they are the fools. He understands something that they don't. He understands, as the song says, that the sun is setting. The sun is setting. The light is going away. The light is going away. And that's why he has to light lanterns in the morning. Why would you light lanterns in the bright morning hour? Why would you shove a lantern in somebody's face and say, I seek God, I seek God? What a fool. All right, let's take a step backwards then. So we've got the Beatles, Fool on the Hill, but let's go backwards to Nietzsche. So this text that I read to you just now is called The Parable of the Madman, and it comes from a text called The Gay Science, written by Nietzsche, and it's called The Gay Science, and this is a title with a lot of meaning, lots of layers of meaning. This phrase was before sort of the current connotations of the word gay. Here, gay just means happy. But more than just happy, it really means what we say Dionysian. In ancient Greek philosophy, it was seen as two very different traditions, one following Dionysius and one following Apollo. So these two deities, Dionysius is the god of wine, the god of joy, the god of party. He's the party god, right? He's the, hey, let's get down and have some fun. Dionysius is the god of the feast. He's about enjoyment, sucking the marrow out of life and just enjoying every moment. The joie de vivre, just sort of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may all die. So that's the Dionysian, that's the gay side. But then the science side, that comes from Apollo, the Apollonian tradition. So the Apollo is, he's the good guy. He's the guy that you maybe wouldn't invite to the party on Friday night, but the guy that you certainly want at his post on Monday morning, that kind of guy. So Apollo is the workhorse. He's the one who gets things done. He's the leader. So Apollo kind of represents the work. Apollo kind of represents the work side and the knowledge side. But Nietzsche, in putting these two together, the gay science, he's trying to make a point, I think, about the relationship between these two things, the relationship between working and playing, between preparing for the future and enjoying the present, right? They're kind of two different sides of the same coin. And Nietzsche wants us to put them together and think about them and try and get out of this dichotomy of work versus play or creation versus recreation. And instead to see these two more as two sides of the same coin, right? Sort of the work leads to the feast, to the festival. It's about you got to do the harvest in order to have the feast. You can't have the feast without the harvest. But if you have the harvest and no feast, then what the fuck is the point, right? That's what Nietzsche's trying to say. We need both the feast and the work, and to see both of these. So Nietzsche and many other philosophers are trying to get us to see the balance between these two things. Okay, there's no question that's the worst Tao I've ever tried to draw. But in my defense, it's right on where the two boards are connected. But I think you get the point, right? Nietzsche's trying to draw attention to this balance between work and play, this balance that's not really separate. They're not two different things. The work leads to the play, and the play is done. The play depends on the work. The creation and the recreation are different moments in our journey or our adventure of being. Okay, enough on that. Dig deeper into this text and also move a bit further backwards in time and try and get a couple of more bits of philosophical wisdom in here. Because there's so many layers to this text. Nietzsche is a very layered, deep thinker, of course. One of the greatest philosophers ever, certainly one of the most highly revered philosophers in our day and time. Here we're going to limit our scope on Nietzsche just to this text and try and understand what this text has to teach us and how it fits in to this religious quest that we're upon. Part of what we're doing here is we're kind of ending up this theory section, moving into some of this ancient wisdom text. We're somewhere in between right now. But what we're also trying to do is build a vocabulary of myth and understand how myths work and what myths are and the layers, how philosophy is communicated through myth, how theology is communicated through myth. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. It's a very good place to start. When you read, you begin with ABC. When you sing, you begin with Do, Re, Mi. When you do Nietzsche, you begin with the madman. On the one hand, on the Beatles side, we've got the Fool on the Hill, which very likely could refer to Ramana Maharshi, a great non-dualist thinker that was deeply influential on George Harrison and many of the Beatles. Next, of course, we have Nietzsche himself. But let's go back a bit further. There's another madman I want to tell you about. His name is Diogenes of Sinope. Now, this guy, he is the OG. Oh, no, wait, sorry. Socrates is the OG. Diogenes of Sinope. He definitely took being a madman to a whole different level. You think I'm being a madman by putting on, like old raggedy clothes? By the way, this is my favorite shirt, so it's not really that much of a sacrifice. And, yeah, I didn't take a shower today. Also, not really a sacrifice. This guy, Diogenes of Sinope, man. Alright, so who was he? Well, he was a student of Socrates. Socrates had a number of very famous students, one of whom was Plato. Socrates had many other students besides just Plato and Diogenes. In fact, Socrates' preferred location for doing philosophy was in the marketplace, which happens to be in the first sentence of this text. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran into the marketplace, and cried incessantly, I seek God, I seek God. Clearly, we've got some reference to Socrates, who wrote a great deal about madness. But today, we're going to talk about Book 7 of Plato's Republic, where he offers the allegory of the cave on what he calls the distinction between education and the lack thereof on the nature of humanity, the nature of the human person. But for now, let's talk about Diogenes. Because Diogenes is dope, man. Diogenes was, he may have been insane. He was certainly performing a certain type of insanity. So he was no fan of Plato, let me tell you that. He was no fan of Plato. For one thing, he thought that Plato shouldn't have been writing down anything. Socrates was very opposed to writing. He said that the only way to do philosophy or theology is through discourse. Right? He didn't have any video cameras in his guest bedroom trying to teach philosophy or talk about theology. You would have thought this was ridiculous. The only way to do philosophy or theology is in the marketplace, where everybody is, where you've got to be around people, and it's that discourse going back and forth that really matters. So Diogenes, being a faithful student of his, never wrote anything, and like Socrates, lived in the marketplace. In fact, he didn't just go to the marketplace and teach there, he lived in the marketplace. He became a homeless person, and he just devoted his life to just sitting in the marketplace and talking philosophy, mostly yelling philosophy, I think, at anybody passing by, and kind of just being a despicable. He's like, if you've seen Rick and Morty, yeah, he's pretty much Rick, I think. Diogenes' insane behavior actually became quite well known, became famous because of the way he acted. This was the time when slavery was quite common, and some citizens who came and just, he was a homeless man, and they picked him up and they took him to their home, and they were intending to turn him into a slave and force him to work. But after a few days, they said, We can't have this guy in our home. He's an animal. We don't want to be anywhere near him. Diogenes was often naked. He would just, sit around the marketplace wearing no clothes at all. So you have Socrates, and then you have Socrates' student Plato, and then Plato had a student named Aristotle, and then Aristotle had several famous students, one of whom was Alexander the Great. Of course, he was just Alexander when he was Aristotle's student, but he became Alexander the Great. He came closer to anyone except for King Cyrus of Persia to taking over the entire known world at that time. And as he was on his rise, taking over the world, he heard about this guy, Diogenes, this old naked philosopher, and he actually had a great admiration for him. And through his admiration for him, he said, I want to go to Sinope and actually meet this dude. And he came to Diogenes and said, "Sir, I respect you, and I've heard so much about you. I wanted to come and sit at your feet and learn from you," right? Who does that? Alexander the Great coming to this homeless, naked man living in the marketplace in Sinope. Diogenes at the time was lying completely naked on the middle of the ground, in the middle of the marketplace, sunbathing. And Alexander walked up to him and said, "Sir, I would like to study with you." And Diogenes' answer was, "If you want to do something for me, you can get the hell out of my sunlight." Really eventually annoyed Alexander, and Alexander said, "Enough of you. You're just like an animal. You seem like a dog." At which point, Diogenes, naked, lying there in the marketplace in Sinope, gets on all fours like a dog, raises his hind leg, and pisses all over Alexander the Great like a dog. So that's a bit about Diogenes. But another thing that links Diogenes here is that Diogenes was known to walk around the marketplace in Sinope carrying a lantern. And he would light the lantern every morning, and he would carry the lantern around in the middle of the day, and he would get right up into people's faces with the lantern, shining it bright into their face, and he would scream, "I seek an honest man! I seek an honest man! I seek an honest man!" Why? Why would he carry a lantern in the middle of the day and say, "I seek an honest person"? Why would Nietzsche's madman carry a lantern in the day saying, "I seek God"? To understand that, we have to go a bit deeper. And by deeper, I mean deeper, as you'll see in a moment. Socrates is definitely the OG madman, right? I got nothing on Socrates. Even unemployed during COVID-19, I still got nothing on Socrates and his madness. We're going to come back to this Nietzsche text. We're definitely not done with it. We're on a detour. It's just part of the journey. We're kind of weaving and wandering back earlier and earlier. And now we're getting to Socrates, and then we're going to come back and see some of the layers and layers of meaning in Nietzsche's text, and why it's so deeply relevant to this course, this madness, this mad journey, this mad philosophical quest, this mad religious quest. But before we delve into the darkness of the cave with Socrates and try to understand why this lantern, the meaning and significance of this lantern, at least insofar as I understand it and as I interpret it, you may have a different interpretation, which I'm eager to hear. But before we do that, I just want to draw attention to one more thing from this first paragraph of Nietzsche's Madman text. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran to the marketplace and cried incessantly, "I seek God, I seek God," as many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then? He provoked much laughter. Okay, so let me just pause and say I'm not a Nietzsche scholar, but I do hear a lot of people call Nietzsche an atheist. I don't know. I don't know Nietzsche. I'm not that familiar with Nietzsche. I just know this text, and I know that it seems quite absurd. It seems like an utter misreading of the text to refer to Nietzsche as an atheist, right? I guess it depends on how you view the madman, and if you view the madman like Socrates and Diogenes and Nietzsche and the Fool on the Hill and Ramana Maharshi and people like me and all those texts that Socrates talks about madness as this good thing, sort of being possessed by the muses, being possessed by the gods, being inspired by the spirits. being taken over by the gods and the muses, this sort of divine inspiration in the way that Socrates talks about it. If you view that as negative, then perhaps you just view the madman as a crazy person, and then I don't know why. I don't really understand what this text would mean from that interpretation. But if you read it just as it is, just literally, the madman is clearly the hero of the text, and he is the one who's proclaiming that God is dead, and he's surrounded by atheists. The atheists are the ones who don't get it, right? The atheists are the one who all say they don't believe in God, and because their non-belief in God, they are the ones who think he's crazy, and they're just confused when he's not only saying, that God exists, but that God is dead. So what does he mean? Why are they laughing at him? What is it that he gets that they don't get? What is the difference then between atheism or not believing in God as those laughing at him, those fools around him who are calling him the fool and ridiculing him, making fun of him and his belief? But what is his belief? His belief is that we have killed God. It's not a non-belief in God. It's not an atheism. It's not a belief in the non-existence of God. It's a belief in the death of God, that we have killed God, and that this is a tragic event. So what the hell? Why? What is this text about? Well, I'll tell you, we're certainly not going to answer that question today. I'm going to start answering that question, and then guess what? In your podcast sessions, when you have discussions with your podcast mates, continuing this phenomenology of Nietzsche's madman text, then I'm eager to hear what you have to say in the way that you interpret this madness and what's going on here. But for now, let's move deeper into the cave. Let's move deeper into the madness and try to understand the significance and meaning of this whole lantern business. What's the lantern representing in this text? And for that, we need to move out of the bright morning sun and move deeper into the cave, where our lanterns will become all the more useful as our eyes adjust to Nietzsche's meaning.